All right, we're working on section 5B. Consider a study designed to learn about the social networks of all college freshmen, in which researchers randomly interview students living on campus dormitories. How will the study suffer due to the way this sample was chosen? So they're only picking people um, on campus. C, it will suffer from selection bias. Selecting students living on in-campus dormitories may not reflect the population. Consider an experiment in which the weights of 6-year-olds are measured. What is the variable of interest in this study? The variable interest is the weights of 6-year-olds. What is a self-selected study? So a self-selected study is when people select it themselves. A survey where people decide for themselves whether they want to be a part of the survey. Self-selected. Describe and contrast selection bias and participation bias in sampling. Selection bias occurs whenever the researchers select their sample in a biased way. Participation bias is when the participation in a study is voluntary. What do you mean by variables of interest in a study? These are the things that you basically measure. What are the confounding variables and what problems do they cause? Right, so confounding variables get in the way of trying to get you to measure the thing that you're trying to measure. So there are items or quantities that are not intended to be part of the study, so they just show up. And there are items or quantities that can affect sample selection. A and B. Decide whether the following statement makes sense or is clearly true or does not make sense. The TV survey got more than 1 million in-phone responses, so it is clearly more valid than a survey by the professional posters based on interviews with only a few hundred people. So the sheer number is not enough. You have to do a bunch of other things to make sure that you've collected these people in a reasonable, unbiased way. The statement does not make sense. The 8 guidelines for evaluating a statistical study need to be reviewed before one study can be called more valid than another. Decide whether the statement makes sense or not. The survey of religious beliefs suffer from selection bias because the questionnaires were handed out only at Catholic churches. The statement makes sense because no religions other than Catholicism will be represented in the responses. Decide whether the following makes sense. My experiment proved beyond a doubt that vitamin C can reduce the severity of colds because I controlled the experiment carefully for every possible confounding variable. That's very difficult to do. So there are all sorts of other reasons why colds are severe. So it's not just vitamin C, there are other things, right? So the statement does not make sense because it is not always easy to discover the confounding variables. Based solely on the information given, is there reason to question the results of the method? Explain your reasoning. A survey of hourly wages of fast food workers in a large city samples 20 workers from each of 10 fast food restaurants. That sounds perfectly okay. The results and method are valid because the entire sample is large and diverse. So you've got 200 people and they're from different 10 fast food restaurants. That's good. Large and diverse. That'll be the only one that's actually valid moving forward. Based solely on the information given, do you have reason to question the results of the following hypothetical study? A study of conservative foundation is designed to assess a new Democratic spending plan. That might have some bias in it. D, yes, there is reason. There is a possibility of bias in the study. Consider the hypothetical study described below. Based solely on the information given, do you have reason to question the results of the study? A TV talk show host asks the TV audience, do you support new national mileage standards for automobiles? And asks people to vote by telephone at a toll-free number. Yes, we have some problems. So the TV audience might not represent the population. Only certain types of people will actually call in. And the way that this is worded might influence responses. Consider the hypothetical study. Researchers designed 5 survey questions to determine whether Norwegian citizens are happier than American citizens. So this is problematic. So how are you defining what happiness means? And how are you going to measure what happiness is? Is there reason to question these results? Researchers conclude that body mass index is the single most important factor in predicting the performance of world-class swimmers. This doesn't seem valid because you need to consider other factors as well. Question or not question. To gauge public opinion on whether there should be a constitutional amendment to ban capital punishment, a survey asks, do you support legalized murder? The results and method are not valid because the survey question is leading. Question or not question. Whether you would believe the stated claim. Citing a higher incidence of cell phone related accidents among teens, the governor's office claims that banning the use of handheld cell phones among drivers under 20 will save lives. Right? So this is just talking about accidents and not deaths. So we got to go with no, since the relationship between cell phone use and traffic fatalities is not described. It was just about accidents, not about deaths. Identify at least one potential source of bias in the claim below. Explain why the bias would or would not affect the reader's view of the claim. Based on a survey of 2,718 people, a research center concluded that 32% of Americans always make a special effort to sort and recycle glass, cans, plastic, or papers, and 24% often make such an effort. So this might suffer from participation bias. It might be present. The bias would affect the reader's claim. The bias would not affect a reader's view of the claim because, let's see here, the percentages do not add up to 100. No one in your group is much more likely to respond. People will want to, no one group of people is much more likely to respond to the survey than any other. Identify any potential sources of bias in the following study. An exit poll designed to predict the winner of a local election uses interviews with every Democrat who votes between only 9 and 9:30 a.m. This is participation bias for sure, because only the people who are participating here are representing the group. Much like sound bites of news stories, statistical studies are often reduced to one or two sentence stat bites. For the following stat bite, discuss what crucial information is missing and what more you would want to know before acting on the study. A newspaper reports that over 60% of adults avoid visits to the dentist because of fear. Right, so we would need more information. We would want to know the size of the sample, how many people, what were they asked? They told us the variable of interest. The goal is pretty clear. And how did you pick respondents? Who were they chosen from? Much like the sound bites of news stories, statistical studies are often reduced to one or two stat bites. According to a newspaper, 26% of Americans rate potatoes their favorite vegetable, making it the most popular vegetable. All right, so how were the questions asked? We know the goal of the study. Did the respondents come up with the choice of potatoes? Did they pick it on their own? And then again, how did you pick the people? Discuss the differences between the following questions, each of which could be the basis of a statistical study. What percentage of internet dates lead to marriage? And what percentage of marriages begin with internet dates? So these are different questions because you're looking at different groups of people. This one you would go to all the internet dates and see who gets married. And this one you would go to all the marriages and ask who came from internet dates. The questions have different populations. Hope it helps.